The smell of charcoal and lighter fluid should have been comforting. Should have reminded me of better times when Sierra actually smiled at my jokes instead of rolling her eyes like I was some embarrassing uncle at a family reunion. But standing there at our block party, flipping burgers while my wife paraded around in that tight red dress she claimed was just something old, I felt like I was grilling my own funeral pyre. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. "Nick, you're burning the patties again," Sierra called out, her voice carrying that familiar edge of disappointment. She was holding court near the Hendersons' pool, surrounded by our neighbors like she was running for mayor instead of just trying to sell them overpriced houses. I scraped the charred meat with more force than necessary. "They're called well done, honey. Some people prefer their food cooked." The sarcasm rolled off her like water off a duck's back. 15 years of marriage had given her immunity to my particular brand of wit. She just laughed that fake laugh she'd perfected for clients and turned back to her audience. That's when Tasha Morrison appeared at my elbow like some kind of suburban angel of chaos. She was wearing a sundress that showed off her runner's legs and holding 2 beers, one of which she pressed into my free hand. "You look like you could use this," she said, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "Rough crowd tonight?" I glanced around at our neighbors. The Hendersons were deep in conversation with the new couple from the corner house. Mrs. Chen was chasing her grandson around the pool while her husband pretended to read his phone. The Williams family had claimed the best spot under the oak tree, their teenage kids already bored and scrolling through social media. "Just the usual suburban circus," I said, taking a sip of the beer. It was ice cold and exactly what I needed. "Thanks for this." Tasha moved closer, close enough that I caught a whiff of her perfume. Something light and citrusy that made me think of summer mornings instead of the heavy floral stuff Sierra bathed herself in these days. "Can I ask you something, Nick?" Her green eyes held mine with an intensity that made my stomach do a little flip. "Are you happy?" The question hit me like a slap, not because it was inappropriate, but because I couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked me that. Really asked. Like they actually cared about the answer. "That's a loaded question for a block party," I said, trying to keep things light. "Maybe, but you didn't answer it." Before I could figure out how to respond, she stepped even closer. Close enough that anyone watching would definitely notice. Close enough that I could see the little flecks of gold in her green eyes. "I've been wanting to ask you something else too," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you single?" The words hung in the air between us like smoke from the grill. I felt my face flush, part embarrassment, part something else I didn't want to name. "Tasha, I'm married," I said, but even as the words came out, they felt hollow, like I was reciting lines from a play I'd forgotten I was in. "Are you, though?" She glanced toward Sierra, who was now laughing at something Brandon Walsh was saying. Brandon, who worked at Sierra's real estate office and looked like he'd stepped out of a men's fitness magazine. Brandon, who seemed to find excuses to touch my wife's arm every time he made a point. "If I were your wife," Tasha continued, her voice soft but clear, "I'd never let you out of my sight, especially not when you look this good in an apron." The compliment should have made me laugh. Should have been the kind of harmless flirtation that happened at neighborhood parties after a few drinks. Instead, it felt like someone had just thrown me a life preserver while I was drowning. That's when Sierra appeared, moving across the patio with the predatory grace of a woman who'd spotted a threat to her territory. She was carrying a fresh drink and wearing a smile that could have cut glass. "Tasha, honey," she said, sliding up to my other side and placing a possessive hand on my chest. "I hope my husband isn't boring you with his dad jokes." The emphasis on "my husband" was subtle but unmistakable. Tasha got the message loud and clear, But instead of backing down, she smiled right back. "Actually, we were just talking about how lucky you are," Tasha said. "Nick was telling me about all the late nights you've been working lately. Such dedication to your career." Sierra's smile faltered for just a moment, but she recovered quickly. "The real estate market is so competitive these days. Sometimes you have to put in extra hours to stay ahead." "I bet," Tasha said, her tone perfectly innocent. "Brandon must be grateful to have such a committed colleague." The air between the three of us crackled with tension. I felt like I was watching a tennis match played with hand grenades. Sierra's grip on my chest tightened, her nails digging in just enough to let me know she was pissed. "Well," Sierra said, her voice bright and brittle, "I should go mingle with our other guests. Nick, try not to burn anything else, okay?" She leaned up and kissed my cheek, a performance for Tasha's benefit more than any show of affection. Then she glided away, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding and my head spinning. "Interesting reaction," Tasha observed, taking a sip of her beer. "For someone who's just working late." I wanted to defend my wife, wanted to explain that Sierra was just tired, stressed from work, going through a rough patch that all marriages hit eventually. But the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, in a place I'd been trying not to look, I knew Tasha was right to be suspicious. The late nights had started 3 months ago. "Big client," Sierra had explained. "Lots of paperwork to process." But when I'd called her office one evening to see if she wanted me to pick up dinner, her assistant had told me Sierra had left hours earlier. When I'd asked her about it, she'd gotten defensive, accused me of not trusting her, of being paranoid and controlling. We'd fought about it, one of those circular arguments that left us both exhausted and nothing resolved. After that, I'd stopped asking questions. But now, watching her laugh at something Brandon was saying, seeing the way she touched his arm, just like Tasha had pointed out, I felt something cold and hard settle in my stomach. "I should get back to the grill," I said, not really answering Tasha's implied question. "Of course," she said, but she didn't move away. "Nick, if you ever want to talk, really talk, I'm right next door, and I mean that." She squeezed my arm gently and walked away, leaving me alone with the smell of charcoal and the growing certainty that my life was about to change in ways I wasn't ready for. The rest of the party passed in a blur of forced conversations and fake smiles. I played the part of the happy husband, flipping burgers and making small talk about lawn care and property values. But all the while, I was watching Sierra and Brandon, cataloging every shared glance and casual touch. By the time the last neighbor had gone home and we'd finished cleaning up, it was nearly midnight. Sierra was in the bathroom, going through her elaborate nighttime routine, when I decided to grab her iPad to check the weather for tomorrow. That's when I saw the notification. A text message from Brandon Walsh sent just 20 minutes earlier. "You free tonight? I need you bad." My hands shook as I opened the message thread. Months of messages. Photos that no married woman should be sending to a coworker. Love notes that talked about futures that didn't include me. And at the bottom, the most recent exchange. Brandon. "When are you going to leave him?" Sierra. "Soon. I just need to figure out the finances first." Brandon. "I sent you the spare key code to my place, 4782. Use it whenever you want." I sat there in our living room, surrounded by the remnants of our block party, reading about the end of my marriage in real time. The woman I'd loved for 15 years, the mother of my daughter, was planning to leave me for a man who looked like a Ken doll and had the emotional depth of a puddle. But it was the last message that really twisted the knife. Sierra. "He has no idea. Poor Nick thinks I'm working late. It's almost too easy." The sound of the bathroom door opening made me quickly close the iPad and set it aside. Sierra emerged in her silk pajamas, looking beautiful and guilty, and completely unaware that her world was about to come crashing down. "Ready for bed?" she asked, not quite meeting my eyes. Actually, I said, standing up with a calmness that surprised me, I think I'll stay up for a while. Maybe work on some projects in the garage. She looked relieved, which told me everything I needed to know about the state of our marriage. Okay, don't stay up too late. She kissed my forehead like I was her brother instead of her husband and headed upstairs. I waited until I heard our bedroom door close, then grabbed my keys and headed for my truck. If Sierra wanted to play games, I was ready to play. But she was about to learn that 15 years of marriage had taught me a few things about her habits and weaknesses, too. Brandon Walsh lived in one of those new luxury condos downtown, the kind with a doorman and a parking garage that required a keycard to access. But I'd been there before, back when Sierra and I were still pretending to be a normal couple who attended office parties together. I parked across the street and waited. Sure enough, at 12:47 a.m., Sierra's white BMW pulled into the garage entrance. She had a key card. Of course she did. I waited another 10 minutes, then walked over to the guest parking area where Brandon's silver Mercedes sat gleaming under the security lights. It was a beautiful car, probably cost more than I made in 6 months. The kind of car that screamed success and sophistication and everything Sierra thought she deserved. The key I used to scratch a message into the driver's side door was from my keychain, the one with the little bottle opener that Sierra had given me for our 10th anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. Next time, it's your face, I carved into the metal, each letter deliberate and deep enough to require expensive bodywork to fix. Then I walked back to my truck and drove home, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Powerful. I was in the garage pretending to organize my tools when Sierra's phone buzzed with a text message at 2:15 a.m. Then another. Then a phone call that went to voicemail. She came downstairs 20 minutes later, fully dressed and carrying her purse. I have to go out, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Emergency at work. At 2:30 in the morning? It's complicated. I'll be back in a few hours. She was gone before I could ask any more questions, but I didn't need to. I knew exactly where she was going and why Brandon had called. I also knew that whatever happened next, the old Nick was gone. The trusting husband, the devoted father, the man who believed in happily ever after, that guy had faded tonight in our living room, eliminated by a text message, and 15 years of slowly growing apart. What was left was someone harder, angrier, and a lot more dangerous than Sierra had ever imagined. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. We need to talk, now. Attached was a video file. Security camera footage from the condo's parking garage, showing me keying Brandon's car with perfect clarity. I looked at the timestamp. The message had been sent 3 minutes ago. My heart pounded as I realized someone had been watching me, recording me, and now had evidence of what I'd done. But instead of panic, I felt something else entirely. I felt alive. Game on. The next morning arrived with all the subtlety of a hangover and twice the regret. I'd spent the remaining hours until dawn sitting in my garage, staring at that text message and trying to figure out who had sent it. The security footage was crystal clear. There was no denying it was me keying Brandon's Mercedes. But who had access to the condo's cameras? And more importantly, what did they want? Sierra stumbled in around 6 a.m., her hair messed up and her makeup smeared, claiming she'd fallen asleep at the office. It was such a transparent lie that I almost admired her commitment to the performance. Rough night? I asked, not looking up from my coffee. You could say that. She poured herself a cup and leaned against the counter, studying me with eyes that held a wariness that hadn't been there before. Did you sleep okay? Like a baby. Weird dreams, though. Something about karma coming back to bite people in the ass. She nearly choked on her coffee. That's specific. I've always had a vivid imagination. Our daughter Lila chose that moment to bounce into the kitchen, all 16-year-old energy and oblivious to the tension crackling between her parents. She was already dressed for school in the kind of outfit that made me want to lock her in her room until she turned 30. "Morning, parental units," she said, grabbing a granola bar from the cabinet. "Dad, can you drive me to school today? Mom looks like she got hit by a truck." "Thanks, sweetheart," Sierra said dryly. "Your compassion is overwhelming." "I'm just being honest. You've been working way too much lately. Maybe you should take a vacation or something." The innocent suggestion hit Sierra like a physical blow. I watched her face cycle through guilt, panic, and something that might have been regret before settling on forced brightness. "Maybe you're right. I'll think about it." "Cool. So, Dad, about that ride?" "Sure thing, kiddo." As I drove Lila to school, she chattered about her classes and her friends and the drama of teenage life that seemed so important and so trivial at the same time. I found myself really listening to her for the first time in weeks, cataloging the sound of her voice and the way she gestured when she got excited about something. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked as we pulled into the school parking lot. "You seem, I don't know, different." "Different how?" "Sadder, I guess, but also kind of angry. Are you and Mom fighting about something?" The question caught me off guard. I'd thought we'd been hiding our problems better than that. But kids are perceptive in ways adults forget, especially when it comes to the people they love. "Your mom and I are going through a rough patch," I said carefully. "But that's between us, okay? It's not your fault, and it's not your problem to fix. Is she having an affair?" The blunt question hit me like a punch to the gut. "Why would you ask that?" "She's been getting a lot of texts lately, and she always hides her phone when I'm around. Plus, she's been dressing differently, nicer, like she's trying to impress someone." I stared at my daughter, this almost adult who saw more than I'd given her credit for. Part of me wanted to lie, to protect her from the ugly reality of what her mother was doing. But another part of me, the part that was tired of being the only one in the dark, wanted to tell her everything. "I don't know," I said finally, "but if she is, we'll figure it out together, okay?" She leaned over and hugged me, something she hadn't done in months. "I love you, Dad. Whatever happens." "I love you too, kiddo. More than you know." After dropping Lila off, I drove to my job at Morrison Construction, no relation to Tasha, despite the coincidental last name. I was a project manager, which meant I spent my days juggling schedules and budgets and trying to keep various subcontractors from eliminating each other. It was steady work that paid the bills and gave me health insurance, but it wasn't exactly what you'd call glamorous. My friend Ray was waiting for me in the parking lot, leaning against his truck and smoking a cigarette despite the company's no-smoking policy. Ray was one of those guys who looked like he'd been carved out of granite and leather, all tattoos and scars and stories he'd never tell in mixed company. He'd been my closest friend since we'd started working together 5 years ago, mainly because he was one of the few people who could match my sarcasm with his own brand of dark humor. "You look like shit," he said by way of greeting. "Good morning to you too, sunshine." "Rough night with the missus?" I considered how much to tell him. Ray wasn't exactly the type for heart-to-heart conversations, but he was loyal and practical and had a way of cutting through bullshit that I appreciated. "Sierra's cheating on me," I said, the words coming out easier than I'd expected. Ray took a long drag of his cigarette and studied my face. "You sure?" "Found the text messages. Followed her to his place last night." "Shit. I'm sorry, man. What are you going to do about it?" "I'm working on it." Something in my tone made him look at me more carefully. "Nick, whatever you're thinking, be smart about it. Don't do anything that's going to land you in jail or cost you your kid. I'm not planning to hurt anyone. Much. That's what worries me." He flicked his cigarette into the parking lot and started walking toward the building. "But for what it's worth, if you need backup, you know where to find me." The workday dragged by in a haze of phone calls and paperwork. I kept checking my phone, waiting for another message from my mysterious blackmailer, but nothing came. Sierra texted me once around lunch to ask if I could pick up groceries on my way home, like we were still playing the game of normal married couple. I was in the middle of reviewing blueprints when my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Mr. Peterson? This is Detective Martinez with the Metro Police. I'd like to ask you a few questions about an incident that occurred last night. What kind of incident? Vandalism. A vehicle was damaged in the parking garage at the Meridian condos downtown. We have security footage that shows someone matching your description in the area around the time of the incident. I closed my eyes and tried to think. Lying to a police officer was never a good idea, but admitting to vandalism wasn't exactly appealing either. I'd like to speak to a lawyer before answering any questions, I said. That's your right, sir. But I should mention that the owner of the vehicle is willing to discuss this matter privately if you're interested in working something out. Brandon. Of course. He didn't want the police involved any more than I did. Probably didn't want Sierra to know he'd been stupid enough to park in a place where he could be seen with someone else's wife. What kind of discussion? Why don't you give him a call? I think you two might be able to work something out like adults. He gave me Brandon's number and hung up, leaving me staring at my phone and wondering how my life had gotten so complicated so quickly. I waited until after work to make the call. Brandon answered on the second ring, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Nick, I was wondering when I'd hear from you. I understand you want to have a conversation. That's one way to put it. Meet me at Murphy's bar on 5th Street in an hour. Come alone. Murphy's was the kind of dive bar where construction workers went to drink away their paychecks, and nobody asked questions about the conversations happening in the back booths. It was also neutral territory, which I appreciated. Brandon was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a beer in front of him and murder in his eyes. He looked different than he had at the block party, older, meaner, like someone had stripped away the pretty boy facade to reveal something uglier underneath. Sit down, he said without preamble. I ordered a beer from the waitress and took the seat across from him, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. Nice work on my car, he said. Very mature. I thought so. You know, I could have you arrested. Destruction of property, criminal mischief. You'd lose your job, probably do some jail time. But you won't. Why not? Because then you'd have to explain to the police why you were at your condo at 1 a.m. with my wife. And I'm guessing Sierra wouldn't appreciate having her name in a police report. His jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. What do you want, Nick? I want you to stay away from my wife. That's not really up to me, is it? Sierra's a grown woman. She can make her own choices. Sierra is married. To me. With a teenage daughter who doesn't need to see her family destroyed because some pretty boy can't keep it in his pants. Brandon leaned back in his chair, a smug smile spreading across his face. You know what I think? I think you're scared. Scared that Sierra's finally figured out she can do better than a middle-aged construction worker who peaked in high school. The insult hit its mark, but I kept my expression neutral. Is that what she told you? That she's too good for me? She didn't have to tell me. It's pretty obvious. Look at you, Nick. When's the last time you bought a new shirt? When's the last time you took her somewhere nicer than Applebee's? When's the last time you made her feel like she was worth something more than a mortgage payment and a minivan? Each question was a knife twist, mainly because there was enough truth in them to hurt. Sierra had been dropping hints for years about wanting more excitement, more romance, more of everything I apparently wasn't giving her. So your solution was to help yourself to another man's wife? My solution was to show Sierra what it feels like to be with a man who appreciates her, who can give her the things she deserves. Like what? A key to your condo and a bunch of lies about leaving her husband? His smug expression faltered slightly. She told you about that. I read the text messages, Brandon, all of them, including the ones where she calls me clueless, and you two laugh about how easy it is to fool the stupid husband. Now he looked genuinely uncomfortable. Look, Nick, it's not personal. Not personal? You're sleeping with my wife and planning to break up my family, but it's not personal? Sierra was already unhappy. If it wasn't me, it would have been someone else. Maybe, but it is you, and that makes it my problem. I stood up and threw a 10 on the table. Here's how this is going to work, Brandon. You're going to stop seeing my wife. You're going to delete her number from your phone. And you're going to find a new job, somewhere far away from here. He laughed. Actually laughed. Or what? You'll key my car again? No. Next time, I'll do something that can't be fixed with bodywork. I walked out of the bar feeling like I'd accomplished exactly nothing except making Brandon more determined to steal my wife. But as I drove home, I realized something important. I wasn't the same man who'd discovered those text messages last night. That guy would have begged Brandon to leave Sierra alone, would have tried to bargain or reason with him. This version of me had just threatened a man in a public place and felt pretty good about it. Sierra was in the kitchen when I got home, making dinner and humming to herself like she didn't have a care in the world. She looked up when I walked in, and for a moment I saw a flash of something. Guilt, maybe, or fear, before she smiled that fake smile she'd perfected. "How was your day?" she asked. "Interesting. Had a beer with Brandon Walsh." She froze, a wooden spoon halfway to her mouth for tasting. "Brandon? Why?" "Someone keyed his car last night. He wanted to discuss it." "That's terrible. Did he say who did it?" "He has some ideas." She turned back to the stove, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "Well, I hope they catch whoever did it. That's such a violation. Isn't it just?" My phone buzzed with a text message. This time, it wasn't from an unknown number. It was from Tasha next door. "Saw you leave earlier. Everything okay? If you need someone to talk to, I'm here." I looked at Sierra, stirring sauce and pretending everything was normal, and made a decision that would change everything. "I'm going to take a walk," I said. "Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. Save me a plate." I walked out the back door and across our adjoining yards to Tasha's patio, where she was sitting with a glass of wine and what looked like a romance novel. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, and her face lit up with a smile that was nothing like Sierra's calculated expressions. "Nick, I was hoping you'd come by." "Were you?" "Sit down. You look like you need that drink I offered you last night." She disappeared into her house and came back with a beer and a second wine glass. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the sounds of suburban evening, lawn mowers and distant television sets, and the laughter of kids playing in backyards. "So," she said finally, "do you want to talk about it?" And for the first time in months, maybe years, I did. Talking to Tasha was like taking off shoes that had been too tight for years. She listened without judgment, asked questions that showed she was really paying attention, and didn't try to fix everything or tell me what I should do. By the time I finished telling her about Sierra's affair, Brandon's smugness, and my growing certainty that my marriage was over, it was fully dark, and we'd moved through several drinks. "I'm sorry, Nick," she said, when I finally ran out of words. "That's a lot to process. The worst part is feeling like an idiot. Looking back, there were so many signs. Late nights, new clothes, the way she started picking fights over stupid stuff like I was irritating her just by existing. You're not an idiot. You're someone who trusted the person you married. That's not a character flaw." "Feels like one right now." Tasha reached over and squeezed my hand. Her skin was warm and soft, and I realized it had been months since Sierra had touched me with any real affection. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know. Part of me wants to confront her, demand she choose between me and Brandon. But I already know what she'd choose." "Maybe that's not the right question." "What do you mean?" "Maybe the question isn't what Sierra's going to choose. Maybe it's what you're going to choose. What you want your life to look like." It was a simple observation, but it hit me like a revelation. For months, I'd been reacting to Sierra's choices, trying to figure out how to win her back or make her happy or save our marriage. I hadn't stopped to consider what I actually wanted. I should get back, I said, standing up. Sierra will wonder where I am. Will she, though? The question followed me home, where I found Sierra cleaning up the kitchen and Lila doing homework at the dining room table. My untouched dinner was wrapped in plastic in the refrigerator. There you are, Sierra said without looking up from loading the dishwasher. I was starting to worry. It was such a casual lie that I almost admired her commitment to the performance. She hadn't been worried. She'd probably been relieved to have me out of the house so she could text Brandon without having to hide her phone. Just talking to Tasha next door, I said. She's having some issues with her ex-husband. Sierra's hands stilled on the plates she was loading. Oh, that's nice of you to help. She's a good listener. Sometimes it helps to talk to someone who isn't emotionally invested in your problems. The barb hit home. Sierra's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. Instead, she finished loading the dishwasher and announced she had some work to catch up on upstairs. More late-night emergencies? I asked. Just some contracts to review. She kissed the top of Lila's head and headed for the stairs, pausing when she reached the bottom step. Nick? Maybe we should talk soon. About things. What kind of things? Just things. We'll find a time. She disappeared upstairs, leaving me with the distinct impression that my wife was finally ready to ask for a divorce. The thought should have devastated me. Instead, I felt something that might have been relief. Over the next few days, I fell into a routine that felt like preparing for war. I moved money from our joint accounts into a personal account Sierra didn't have access to. I made copies of important documents and stored them in a safety deposit box. I researched divorce lawyers and started documenting Sierra's schedule, noting every late night and suspicious excuse. But I also did something else. I started paying attention to the people around me in a way I hadn't before. I noticed which neighbors seemed genuinely happy and which ones were just going through the motions. I watched how couples interacted at the grocery store and the gas station, cataloging the small gestures that indicated real affection versus polite tolerance. And I started noticing how people reacted to Sierra and me as a couple. The revelation came at Lila's school awards ceremony, one of those mandatory parental events where you sit in uncomfortable auditorium seats and applaud for other people's kids while waiting for your own child's moment in the spotlight. Sierra had agreed to come, which surprised me until I realized Brandon was there too, apparently supporting his nephew or some other convenient excuse. We were sitting 3 rows apart, but I could feel the tension crackling between them like static electricity. Sierra kept checking her phone and glancing in his direction. Brandon was doing the same thing, like they were teenagers passing notes in class. Your wife seems distracted, observed Carol Henderson, who was sitting next to me. Carol was one of those neighborhood social directors who knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing her observations. Work stuff, I said automatically. Carol's tone suggested she wasn't buying it. That Brandon Walsh is a handsome man, isn't he? The comment was delivered with the kind of casual innocence that meant it was anything but casual. Carol had noticed something, and she was fishing to see what I knew about it. I suppose. Sierra seems to think so. I saw them having coffee together last week at that little place downtown. Very cozy conversation. My pressure spiked, but I kept my expression neutral. They work together. Of course they do. Carol smiled, the kind of smile that said she knew exactly what kind of work they were doing together. It's just nice to see colleagues who get along so well. After the ceremony, Sierra made a show of congratulating Lila on her academic achievement award, but I could tell she was distracted. She kept glancing toward the exit where Brandon had disappeared, probably waiting for her to follow. I need to make a quick stop before we go home, she said as we walked to our cars. Work thing. At 9 o'clock at night? It's important. Lila looked between us, picking up on the tension. Can I ride with Dad? Of course, Sierra said quickly. I'll see you both at home. She was gone before either of us could respond, leaving me standing in the parking lot with my daughter and a growing sense that I was done playing the fool. Dad, Lila said as we drove home, are you and Mom getting divorced? The direct question caught me off guard. Why do you ask? Because you guys are acting weird, like weirder than usual. And Mom's been gone a lot lately, and when she is home, she seems like she wishes she wasn't. I pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine, trying to figure out how to answer. Lila was 16, old enough to handle the truth, but young enough that it would hurt in ways she wasn't prepared for. Your mom and I are having problems, I said finally. I don't know if we're going to get divorced, but it's possible. Is she cheating on you? The blunt question hit me like a physical blow. What makes you ask that? I'm not stupid, Dad. She's been acting guilty about something, and there's this guy from her work who keeps texting her. Plus, she's been buying new clothes and wearing more makeup. It's not exactly subtle. I stared at my daughter, this almost adult who had figured out what I'd been trying to ignore for months. Part of me wanted to lie, to protect her from the ugly reality of what her mother was doing. But I was tired of being the only one who didn't know what was going on. Yes, I said. I think she is. Lila nodded like she'd been expecting that answer. What are you going to do about it? I'm working on it. Good, because you deserve better than someone who lies to you. She got out of the car and headed for the house, leaving me sitting in the driveway and marveling at how much smarter my kid was than I'd given her credit for. That night, after Sierra came home with another transparent excuse about client emergencies, I made a decision. I was done being reactive, done waiting for her to decide my fate. It was time to take control of the situation. I started with something simple. I changed the password on our home Wi-Fi network. It was petty, but it would force Sierra to ask me for the new password, which would be awkward if she was trying to communicate with Brandon while she was supposed to be home with her family. Then I did something more significant. I called Sierra's boss, Margaret Chen, and asked if she'd like to have coffee to discuss a surprise party for Sierra's upcoming birthday. Margaret was delighted to help, which made what I learned during our conversation even more devastating. According to Margaret, Sierra had been leaving work early most days for the past 3 months, claiming various personal appointments and family obligations. She'd also been using vacation days without mentioning it to me, supposedly for mental health time that apparently involved spending afternoons with Brandon. But the most interesting thing Margaret told me was about the company's new policy regarding workplace relationships. We had to implement it after some drama last year, Margaret explained over coffee. Any romantic relationship between co-workers has to be disclosed to HR, especially if one person is in a supervisory position over the other. Is Sierra in a supervisory position over anyone? Well, she's senior to Brandon, yes. She's been mentoring him since he started 6 months ago. 6 months. Sierra's affair had been going on for 6 months, not 3 like I'd thought, which meant she'd been lying to me for twice as long as I'd realized. That's quite a responsibility, I said carefully. I hope Brandon appreciates her guidance. Margaret's expression shifted slightly, like she was picking up on something in my tone. Nick, is everything okay? You seem tense. Just work stress, you know how it is. But Margaret was too smart to buy that explanation entirely. I could see her filing away our conversation for future reference, which was exactly what I'd hoped would happen. That evening, I put the next phase of my plan into action. While Sierra was upstairs supposedly working on contracts, I used her laptop to access our joint credit card accounts. What I found there painted a picture of deception that was even worse than I'd imagined. Charges at expensive restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel rooms booked during times when Sierra claimed to be showing houses. Purchases at lingerie stores and jewelry shops that had never resulted in gifts for me. She'd been funding her affair with our money, probably laughing about how clueless I was while she and Brandon enjoyed romantic dinners I was paying for. But it was the most recent charge that really caught my attention. A reservation at the Grandview Hotel for the upcoming weekend, booked under Sierra's name for 2 guests. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen and feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. Sierra was planning a romantic weekend getaway with Brandon, probably while telling me she had to attend some work conference. That's when I heard her footsteps on the stairs. "Nick, can you help me with something?" I quickly closed the browser and turned around as Sierra appeared in the doorway. She was holding her phone and looking frustrated. "The Wi-Fi isn't working," she said. "My phone won't connect." "I changed the password. Security update." "Oh, what's the new password?" I pretended to think about it. "Loyalty," all caps. She typed it in, and I watched her face as the word registered. For just a moment her mask slipped, and I saw guilt and fear flash across her features. "That's an interesting choice," she said carefully. "I thought so. It's important to remember what matters, don't you think?" "Of course." She started to leave, then turned back. "Nick, about this weekend. I have a conference in Atlanta. I'll be gone Friday night through Sunday." There it was, the lie I'd been expecting, delivered with the same casual ease she'd perfected over months of deception. "That's too bad," I said. "I was hoping we could spend some time together. Maybe work on some of those things you mentioned we needed to talk about." "We will, when I get back." "Of course. Have a good trip." After she went back upstairs, I sat in the dark living room and made a decision that would change everything. Sierra wanted to play games? Fine. But she was about to learn that I'd gotten very good at games over the past few days. And unlike her, I played to win. My phone buzzed with a text from Tasha. "Saw your light on. Everything okay?" Instead of texting back, I walked outside and across the yard to where she was sitting on her back porch with a glass of wine and a concerned expression. "Rough night?" she asked. "You could say that. Sierra's planning a romantic weekend with Brandon. Told me it's a work conference." "I'm sorry, Nick. That's awful. Actually, I think it might be perfect." Something in my tone made her look at me more carefully. "What do you mean?" "I mean it's time to stop playing defense. Sierra wants to have her cake and eat it too. Fine. But she's about to learn that actions have consequences." "Nick, what are you planning?" I looked at this woman who'd shown me more genuine kindness in a few days than my wife had in months, and I made another decision that would have surprised the old me. "Would you like to have dinner with me this weekend? Somewhere nice?" "Nick, I'm not asking you to be my rebound or help me get revenge. I'm asking because I'd like to spend time with someone who actually enjoys my company." She studied my face in the dim porch light, looking for something I wasn't sure I could give her. "Yes," she said finally. "I'd like that very much." "Good, because I have a feeling this weekend is going to be very interesting for everyone involved." As I walked back to my house, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. Not for Sierra's reaction when she realized I knew about her weekend plans, but for the possibility that there might be life after this marriage. The old Nick would have spent the weekend moping around the house, feeling sorry for himself while his wife enjoyed a romantic getaway with another man. This Nick had other plans entirely. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel possible. Sierra was bustling around the house, packing for her fake conference with the kind of excited energy she hadn't shown for anything involving me in months. She'd bought new clothes for the trip. I'd seen the charges on our credit card, and she was taking extra care with her hair and makeup. "You look nice," I said, watching her check her reflection in the hallway mirror. "Brandon's going to love it." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Sierra froze, her hand halfway to her lipstick, and our eyes met in the mirror. "What did you say?" "I said Atlanta's going to love it. You know how those southern cities appreciate a well-dressed woman." She studied my reflection, looking for signs that I'd meant what she thought I'd meant. But I kept my expression neutral, even smiled a little. Right, Atlanta. Have a good conference, honey. Learn lots of new techniques. This time there was no mistaking the double meaning. Sierra's face went pale, then flushed red, but she couldn't call me out without admitting there was something to call out. I should get going. Traffic will be terrible. I'm sure the other attendees will be waiting for you. She grabbed her suitcase and headed for the door without kissing me goodbye. I watched from the window as she threw her bag in the trunk of her BMW with more force than necessary, her movements sharp with anger and anxiety. Good. Let her spend the drive to the Grandview Hotel wondering how much I knew. After Sierra left, I called in sick to work and spent the morning implementing the next phase of my plan. First, I drove to the local print shop and had them create a professional-looking flyer advertising Sierra's real estate services. The photo was one I'd taken from her company website, and the text was standard marketing copy about her expertise and dedication to clients. What made the flyer special was the small addition I'd made at the bottom. Ask me about my special weekend packages for out-of-town clients. I had 500 copies printed. Next, I stopped by the Grandview Hotel and had a friendly conversation with the desk clerk, a young man named Tyler who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I'm planning a surprise for my wife, I told him, sliding a 20 across the counter. She's staying here this weekend for a work conference, and I want to send flowers to her room. That's sweet, Tyler said, pocketing the 20. What's her name? Sierra Peterson. She should be checking in later today. Tyler typed on his computer, then frowned. I see a Sierra Peterson, but the reservation shows 2 guests. Oh, that's probably her colleague. They're sharing a room to save money. Actually, it looks like it's a suite, with a king bed. I let my face fall, like I was just realizing what that meant. A suite? For a work conference? Tyler looked uncomfortable, realizing he'd just delivered news that no husband wants to hear. I'm sorry, sir. Maybe there's some mistake? Yeah, I said quietly. Maybe there is. I left the hotel and drove to Sierra's office, where I had another friendly conversation, this time with the receptionist, Jessica. Jessica was young and gossipy and had always been a little flirtatious with me during the few times I'd visited Sierra at work. Nick, what are you doing here? Sierra's out of town. I know. I was hoping to surprise her at her conference, but I can't remember which hotel she said she was staying at. Do you happen to know? Jessica's face lit up with the excitement of being included in what she thought was a romantic gesture. Oh, that's so sweet. Let me check her travel request. She typed on her computer, then looked confused. That's weird. There's no travel request filed for this weekend, and I don't see any conferences on the company calendar. Maybe it's a last-minute thing? Maybe. But usually Margaret has to approve all travel expenses in advance. Jessica looked genuinely puzzled. I could call her if you want. No, don't bother her. I'll figure it out. But I could see the wheels turning in Jessica's head. Sierra's unexplained absence, combined with my surprise visit, was creating questions that would spread through the office like wildfire. Perfect. That afternoon, I picked up Lila from school and took her out for an early dinner at her favorite restaurant. She'd been quiet all week, picking up on the tension in the house, and I wanted to give her a chance to talk without Sierra around to complicate things. So, Mom's really at a conference? She asked over her burger and fries. That's what she says. But you don't believe her? It wasn't a question. Lila had inherited her mother's intelligence and her father's ability to read people, which made her dangerously perceptive for a 16-year-old. What do you think? I asked. I think she's with that guy from her office, the one who's been texting her. How do you know about him? I'm not blind, Dad. Plus, she left her phone on the kitchen counter yesterday and it kept buzzing. The messages were from someone named Brandon and they weren't about work. I felt a surge of anger at Sierra for being so careless, for letting our daughter see evidence of her affair. But I also felt proud of Lila for being smart enough to protect herself by paying attention to what was really going on. "I'm sorry you have to deal with this," I said. "It's not your fault. Mom's the one making bad choices." "It's complicated, kiddo. Marriage is hard sometimes. Not that hard. You don't cheat on people you love." The simple statement hit me like a punch to the gut, mainly because it was absolutely true. Whatever problems Sierra and I had, whatever issues we'd failed to work through, none of it justified what she was doing. "You're right," I said. "You don't. So what are you going to do about it?" "I'm working on it. But whatever happens, you need to know that none of this is your fault, and both your mom and I love you very much." "I know. But Dad, when you do whatever you're planning to do, make sure you win." That evening, while Lila was at a friend's house for a sleepover, I got dressed for my dinner with Tasha. I chose my best shirt, the one Sierra used to say brought out my eyes, and actually spent time on my hair instead of just running a comb through it. When I knocked on Tasha's door, she answered wearing a blue dress that made her look like something out of a movie. She'd done something different with her hair, and she was wearing perfume that smelled like vanilla and promises. "You look beautiful," I said. "So do you. Handsome, I mean." We drove to Romano's, an Italian place downtown that I'd always wanted to try, but Sierra had always dismissed as too pretentious. The food was incredible, the wine was better, and the conversation flowed like we'd known each other for years instead of days. "Can I ask you something?" Tasha said over dessert. "Shoot. Are you doing this to get back at Sierra, or because you actually want to be here with me?" It was a fair question, and one I'd been asking myself all week. Honestly, maybe a little of both, but mostly because I want to be here with you. I can live with that, as long as you're honest about it. I'm trying to be honest about everything these days. It's harder than it sounds. The truth usually is. We were walking back to my truck when my phone buzzed with a text message. Sierra, checking in from her fake conference. "Having a great time at the seminar, learning so much. Miss you." I showed the message to Tasha, who rolled her eyes. She's really committed to the lie, isn't she? Sierra's always been thorough. It's one of the things I used to admire about her. And now? Now it just makes her a better liar. When we got back to Tasha's house, she invited me in for coffee. We sat on her couch, talking about everything and nothing, and for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not the disappointed husband or the clueless fool, just Nick. A man who could have interesting conversations and make a woman laugh, and maybe even be worth spending time with. "I should go," I said eventually, though I didn't want to. "Should you?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility and danger, and the kind of choice that changes everything. "Tasha, I know. You're married. You're going through a divorce. This is complicated. Very complicated. But you know what? Life's complicated, and sometimes you have to decide whether you're going to let that stop you from being happy." She leaned over and kissed me, soft and sweet, and nothing like the perfunctory peck Sierra had been giving me for months. It lasted about 3 seconds and changed everything. "Think about it," she said when we broke apart. "Whatever you decide, I'm here." I drove home in a daze, my lips still tingling and my head spinning with the realization that there might actually be life after Sierra, that I might be capable of making someone happy, and more importantly, that someone might be capable of making me happy too. My phone was buzzing with messages when I got home. 3 more texts from Sierra, each one more elaborate in its descriptions of conference activities that didn't exist. But there was also a message from an unknown number that sent a chill through me. "Saw you at dinner tonight. Very cozy. Does your wife know you're cheating too?" Attached was a photo of me and Tasha at Romano's, clearly taken through the restaurant window. We were holding hands across the table, both of us smiling, looking like exactly what we were, two people who were genuinely enjoying each other's company. I stared at the photo, trying to figure out who could have taken it and what they wanted. The same person who'd sent me the security footage of Brandon's car? Someone who was watching me, documenting my movements, building a case for… What? My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Nick Peterson? This is Maya Rodriguez. I'm a friend of your wife's. The name was familiar. Maya was Sierra's college roommate, the one who'd moved to town a few months ago and reconnected with Sierra. They'd been spending a lot of time together lately, or at least that's what Sierra had told me. What can I do for you, Maya? I think we need to talk about Sierra and about the choices you've both been making lately. What kind of choices? The kind that could destroy a lot of lives if they're not handled carefully. Meet me tomorrow at Cafe Luna on Market Street. Noon. Come alone. She hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone and wondering how my life had gotten so complicated so quickly. First, the mysterious blackmailer with the security footage. Now Sierra's friend with photos of my dinner with Tasha. I poured myself a drink and sat in my living room, trying to piece together what was happening. Someone was watching me, documenting my actions, collecting evidence of… What? My affair? But I hadn't had an affair. One kiss didn't constitute cheating, especially when my wife was spending the weekend in a hotel suite with another man. Unless that was the point. Unless someone wanted to create the appearance of an affair to give Sierra ammunition in a divorce proceeding or to justify her own behavior. But who? And why? I was still pondering those questions when my phone buzzed with another text from Sierra. Room service was amazing. This hotel really knows how to treat its guests. Wish you were here. The message was accompanied by a photo of an elaborate dinner spread in what was clearly a hotel suite. But Sierra had made a mistake. I could see the reflection of two wine glasses in the window behind the food. 2 glasses, 2 dinners, 2 people enjoying a romantic evening that I was paying for. I forwarded the photo to my own email account, adding it to the growing collection of evidence I'd been building. Then I typed a response that would let Sierra know her lies weren't as convincing as she thought. Looks delicious. Save room for dessert. I hear the Grandview Hotel has an amazing chocolate cake. I hit send and waited. The response came back almost immediately. How did you know I was at the Grandview? Gotcha. Lucky guess. You mentioned it was a nice place. I don't think I did. Maybe Brandon mentioned it. This time, the response took several minutes to come back. I think we need to talk when I get home. I think you're right. I set my phone aside and finished my drink, feeling something that might have been satisfaction. Sierra's weekend of deception was turning into a nightmare of exposure, and tomorrow's meeting with Maya would hopefully provide some answers about who was pulling the strings behind the scenes. But as I headed upstairs to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important. Some piece of the puzzle that would explain why my life had suddenly become a chess game where I didn't know who my opponents were or what they were really after. All I knew for certain was that the old Nick, the trusting husband who believed his wife's lies and ignored the obvious signs of betrayal, was gone forever. What remained was someone harder, smarter, and a lot more dangerous than anyone, including me, had realized. The game was just getting started. Saturday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. I'd barely slept, my mind churning through possibilities and scenarios for the meeting with Maya. By the time I dragged myself out of bed, I had dark circles under my eyes and a knot in my stomach that felt like it was made of barbed wire. Lila was already up, making pancakes and humming to herself like she didn't have a care in the world. Sometimes I envied teenagers their ability to compartmentalize, to focus on the immediate pleasures of Saturday morning breakfast, while their parents' marriage imploded around them. Morning, Dad. You look terrible. Thanks, kiddo. You really know how to boost a guy's ego. Just being honest. Mom called, by the way. Said to tell you she's extending her trip through Monday. I felt my jaw clench. Of course Sierra was extending her romantic getaway. Why settle for one night of adultery when you could have 3? Did she say why? Something about additional seminars. She sounded weird, though, like she was nervous about something. I'm sure she's fine. But even as I said it, I wondered what had Sierra rattled. My text about the Grandview Hotel had clearly shaken her, but there had to be more to it than that. Sierra didn't rattle easily, especially when she thought she held all the cards. I spent the morning doing busy work around the house, trying to keep my hands occupied while my mind raced through possibilities for the noon meeting. By 11:30, I couldn't stand the waiting anymore. I kissed Lila goodbye, promised to be back for dinner, and drove downtown to Café Luna. Maya Rodriguez was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with her back to the wall and her eyes on the door. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair and the kind of sharp intelligence that made me immediately wary. She was also beautiful in a way that suggested she was used to getting what she wanted from men. "Nick," she said, as I approached the table, "thank you for coming." Did I have a choice? Everyone has choices. That's what I want to talk to you about. I sat down across from her and studied her face, looking for clues about what she really wanted. She was calm, composed, like someone who held all the cards and knew it. "You said you wanted to talk about Sierra. Among other things." She slid a manila envelope across the table. "Take a look." Inside were photos, dozens of them, documenting Sierra's affair in excruciating detail. Sierra and Brandon holding hands at restaurants. Sierra and Brandon kissing in parking lots. Sierra and Brandon entering and leaving hotels. The photos were high quality, clearly taken by someone with professional equipment and unlimited patience. "Impressive surveillance work," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Professional? You could say that. I used to work for a private investigation firm before I moved here." "And now you're documenting my wife's affair as a hobby?" "Not exactly." Maya leaned back in her chair, studying me with those sharp, dark eyes. "I'm documenting it because Sierra hired me to document yours." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "3 months ago, your wife came to me with suspicions that you were cheating on her. She wanted evidence for a divorce proceeding, wanted to make sure she got the house, custody of Lila, and a generous alimony settlement." I stared at her, trying to process what she was telling me. But I wasn't cheating. "No, you weren't," which created a problem for Sierra. Hard to prove adultery when there's no adultery to prove. "So she decided to have an affair herself?" "Not initially. Initially, she decided to create evidence of an affair. Fake photos, manufactured situations, false witnesses. She wanted me to help her frame you." The casual way she said it sent a chill through me. "And did you?" I considered it. The money was good, and I didn't know you from Adam. But then I started actually investigating you, and I realized Sierra's accusations were complete bullshit. You weren't cheating, you weren't hiding money, you weren't doing any of the things she claimed you were doing. "So you told her you couldn't help her?" Maya laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I told her I'd need more time to build a solid case. Meanwhile, I kept investigating, and that's when I discovered that Sierra was the one having the affair. With Brandon. Among others." The casual revelation hit me like another slap. "Others?" "Brandon's just the latest. There was a guy named David last year, a client who bought a house through Sierra's agency. Before that, it was her personal trainer. Sierra's been cheating on you for at least 2 years, Nick. Probably longer." I sat back in my chair, feeling like the world was tilting sideways. 2 years. Maybe longer. While I'd been working overtime to pay for our mortgage and Lila's college fund, Sierra had been conducting a series of affairs with the casual ease of someone ordering coffee. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Sierra's planning to destroy you, and I've decided I don't want to be part of it." "What do you mean, destroy me? Maya reached into her purse and pulled out a second envelope. She's been working with Brandon to manufacture evidence of abuse. Fake bruises, staged photos, coached testimony from Lila about your supposedly violent temper. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Inside were photos of Sierra with makeup-created bruises on her arms and face, screenshots of text messages to Brandon describing fictional incidents of domestic violence. Most damning of all, a signed statement from Lila claiming I'd hit both her and her mother multiple times. "This is all fake," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know, but it's convincing fake. Sierra's been planning this for months, building a case that would give her everything in the divorce and probably land you in jail. Lila would never sign something like this." "No, she wouldn't. Sierra forged her signature. I have video evidence of her doing it." I stared at the photos, feeling something dark and cold spreading through my chest. This wasn't just adultery. This was a systematic campaign to destroy my life, to take everything I cared about and leave me with nothing. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "I want you to fight back. Sierra thinks she's the smartest person in the room, but she's made mistakes. Big ones. And I have evidence of all of them." "Why would you help me?" Maya was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the busy street beyond. "Because I've been where Sierra is. I've been the woman who thought she could manipulate and lie and cheat her way to a better life, and I know how it ends." "How does it end?" "Badly. For everyone involved." She turned back to me, and I saw something that might have been regret in her dark eyes. "Sierra's going to try to destroy you, Nick. The question is, are you going to let her?" I looked at the photos spread across the table, evidence of my wife's systematic betrayal and planned destruction of my life. The old Nick would have been devastated, would have begged Sierra to stop, would have tried to reason with her or save their marriage. But the old Nick was gone. "What do you need from me?" I asked. Maya smiled, and for the first time since I'd met her, it looked genuine. "I need you to trust me, and I need you to be ready for war." We spent the next 2 hours planning Sierra's downfall with the methodical precision of generals preparing for battle. Maya had evidence of everything: the forged documents, the fake abuse photos, the financial irregularities in Sierra's real estate dealings that bordered on fraud. But more importantly, she had a plan to expose it all in a way that would destroy Sierra's reputation, career, and carefully constructed lies. "The key is timing," Maya explained. "Sierra's planning to file for divorce on Tuesday, using the fake abuse evidence to get an emergency restraining order. Once that happens, you'll be kicked out of your house and barred from seeing Lila until the hearing." "Can she do that?" "With the right evidence, yes. Judges take domestic violence very seriously, and Sierra's documentation is convincing enough to fool most people. But not you. I know how it was made. I have video of Sierra creating the fake bruises, audio recordings of her coaching Brandon on his testimony, and documentation of every lie she's told over the past 3 months. So, what's the plan?" Maya's smile was sharp as a knife. "We're going to give Sierra exactly what she wants. A public confrontation where she can play the victim and you can play the abusive husband. Except this time, the whole thing will be recorded, and everyone will see who's really telling the truth." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Maya would arrange for Sierra and Brandon to meet us at a neutral location, the parking garage of Sierra's office building, under the pretense of a final negotiation before the divorce filing. Sierra would expect to have the upper hand, armed with her fake evidence and Brandon's support. Instead, she'd walk into a trap that would expose every lie she'd told and every crime she'd committed. "There's just one problem," Maya said as we prepared to leave the cafe. "Once we do this, there's no going back. Sierra will be destroyed, professionally and personally. Are you sure you're ready for that?" I thought about Lila, about the lies Sierra had been telling our daughter, and the fake statement she'd forged in our child's name. I thought about the 2 years of affairs, the systematic theft of our money to fund her betrayals, and the elaborate plan to send me to jail for crimes I'd never committed. Yes, I said. I'm ready. Good. Because Sierra just made a mistake that's going to cost her everything. What kind of mistake? Maya showed me her phone, which was buzzing with a text message from Sierra. Change of plans. Coming home tonight instead of Monday. Need to talk to Nick immediately. Set up the meeting for tomorrow. She's panicking, Maya explained. Something spooked her at the hotel, and now she's rushing her timeline. That's going to work in our favor. How? Because panic makes people sloppy, and Sierra's about to get very, very sloppy. That evening, I sat in my living room waiting for my wife to come home and lie to my face one more time. Lila was upstairs doing homework, blissfully unaware that her mother had forged her signature on documents that could have destroyed both our lives. I'd spent the afternoon moving the last of our joint assets into accounts Sierra couldn't access, canceling credit cards she'd been using to fund her affairs, and preparing for a confrontation that would end our marriage in the most public and humiliating way possible. I should have felt guilty about what I was planning to do to Sierra, should have felt some regret for the woman I'd once loved enough to marry. Instead, I felt something cold and hard and utterly without mercy. Sierra arrived home at 9:30, looking frazzled and nervous in a way I'd never seen before. She'd clearly driven straight from the hotel, her hair still messed up from whatever she and Brandon had been doing in their romantic suite. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "I figured. How was your conference?" "Don't." Her voice was sharp, desperate. "Just don't. I know you know." "Know what?" "About Brandon, about the hotel, about all of it." I studied her face, seeing the cracks in the mask she'd worn for so long. "What exactly do you think I know, Sierra?" "I think you hired someone to follow me. I think you have photos, maybe recordings. I think you're planning to use them against me." It was fascinating, watching her project her own tactics onto me. Sierra was so used to scheming and manipulating that she couldn't imagine I might have discovered her affairs through simple observation and her own carelessness. And if I did? Then we need to work something out. A division of assets that's fair to both of us. Joint custody of Lila. A clean divorce that doesn't destroy either of our reputations. That's generous of you. I'm trying to be reasonable, Nick. For Lila's sake. For Lila's sake? The words came out harder than I'd intended. You forged our daughter's signature on a statement claiming I abused both of you. Don't talk to me about what's best for Lila. Sierra went white, her face draining of color so quickly I thought she might faint. How did you... Who told you about that? Does it matter? The question is, what kind of mother tries to send her daughter's father to prison for crimes he didn't commit? I was protecting myself. From what? From the consequences of your own choices? Sierra started crying, the kind of desperate tears that were meant to manipulate rather than express genuine emotion. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The marriage hasn't been working for years and I needed something more. So you decided to destroy me instead of just asking for a divorce? I was scared. Scared you'd take Lila, scared you'd take the house, scared I'd end up with nothing. So you decided to make sure I'd end up with nothing instead. She looked up at me through her tears, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd once loved, but it was too late for that woman. She'd been replaced by someone capable of forgery and fraud and systematic betrayal. What do you want, Nick? Money? The house? I'll give you whatever you want if we can just end this quietly. I want you to meet me tomorrow at your office building. Parking garage, level 3. Bring Brandon. Why? Because we're going to settle this once and for all. And Sierra, bring your fake evidence, all of it, because tomorrow everyone's going to see exactly who you really are. She stared at me, probably seeing something in my face that she'd never seen before. The old Nick was gone, replaced by someone who played the game better than she did. Nick, please. We can work this out. We don't have to destroy each other. You're right, I said, standing up and heading for the stairs. We don't have to destroy each other, but we're going to anyway. I left her sitting in our living room, crying tears that no one would ever believe again. Tomorrow, Sierra would learn that actions have consequences, and I would finally get the justice I'd been denied for too long. The war was about to begin. Epilogue: The Ashes. Sunday afternoon, the parking garage of Sierra's office building was nearly empty. Just a few cars belonging to weekend workaholics and the security guard who'd probably dozed off in his booth hours ago. Perfect for the kind of conversation that would end careers and destroy lives. I arrived first, parking my truck near the stairwell exit in case things went badly and I needed to leave quickly. Maya pulled up 5 minutes later, her car loaded with recording equipment and cameras that would document everything that was about to happen. You ready for this? She asked as we set up the equipment. I've been ready for months. I just didn't know it. Sierra and Brandon arrived together in his Mercedes, the same car I'd keyed what felt like a lifetime ago. They looked nervous, whispering to each other as they walked toward us across the concrete expanse of the parking garage. Sierra was carrying a briefcase, probably filled with the fake evidence she'd spent months creating. Brandon was trying to look confident, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew this wasn't going to end well for either of them. Nick, Sierra said as they approached. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Wouldn't miss it. She glanced at Maya, clearly recognizing her but not understanding why she was there. Maya, what are you doing here? My job, Maya said simply. I don't understand. You will. I stepped forward, and both Sierra and Brandon instinctively stepped back. Good. They should be afraid. Let's get this over with, I said. Sierra, I know about the affairs, all of them. David, the personal trainer, Brandon, and whoever else you've been screwing while I was working to support our family. Sierra's face went white, but she tried to maintain her composure. Nick, please, let's discuss this rationally. I know about the money you stole from our joint accounts to pay for your romantic getaways. I know about the fake abuse evidence you created to frame me. I know about the forged statement you made in Lila's name. That's not... I can explain. And I know about your plan to have me arrested for domestic violence while you ran off with pretty boy here to start a new life. Brandon finally found his voice. Look, man, this doesn't have to get ugly. We can work something out. I turned to look at him, this man who'd helped my wife plan my destruction, and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. You're right, Brandon. It doesn't have to get ugly. It's going to get ugly anyway. Maya stepped forward, holding up her phone. Sierra, would you like to explain to Nick why you hired me to manufacture evidence of his infidelity? Sierra's composure finally cracked completely. Maya, what are you doing? We had a deal. We did. But then I discovered you were planning to frame an innocent man for domestic violence. That's where I draw the line. You can't do this to me. Actually, I can, and I am. Maya played the first recording, Sierra's voice clear as a bell as she discussed creating fake bruises and coaching Brandon on his testimony. Then came the video of Sierra forging Lila's signature, followed by audio of her laughing about how clueless I was. With each piece of evidence, Sierra seemed to shrink smaller and smaller, until she looked like nothing more than a pathetic woman whose lies had finally caught up with her. You recorded me? She whispered. Every conversation, every meeting, every crime you committed. Brandon tried to run, actually turned and sprinted toward his car like the coward he'd always been. But Maya had anticipated that, and her partner, a large man named Tony who'd been hiding behind a concrete pillar, stepped out to block his path. Going somewhere? Tony asked pleasantly. Brandon looked around wildly, realizing he was trapped. This is kidnapping. You can't hold me here. We're not holding you anywhere, I said. We're just having a conversation. Although I should mention that copies of all this evidence have been sent to your boss, the State Real Estate Commission, and the District Attorney's Office." Sierra made a sound like a wounded animal. "You can't do this to me, Nick. I'm your wife." "No," I said quietly. "You're the woman who tried to destroy me. There's a difference. I'll fight this. I'll hire lawyers. With what money? I closed all our joint accounts yesterday. Turns out when your spouse commits fraud, you can protect your assets pretty quickly. The house is in my name. Always has been. You remember, you thought it would be better for tax purposes." Sierra stared at me, finally understanding that she'd walked into a trap that had been months in the making. "What do you want?" "I want you to disappear. Take your boyfriend, take whatever money you've managed to hide, and get out of my life, out of Lila's life, forever. I'll never give up custody of my daughter. Your daughter whose signature you forged? Your daughter you were willing to coach into lying about abuse? I don't think a family court judge is going to be impressed by your parenting skills." Maya stepped forward again, holding up another phone. "Speaking of Lila, would you like to hear what she had to say when I played her the recordings of you forging her signature?" The audio was brief, but devastating. Lila's voice, shocked and hurt and angry. "She did what? My mom tried to frame my dad? Oh my God, I hate her. I never want to see her again." Sierra collapsed, literally fell to her knees on the concrete floor of the parking garage. "Please, Nick, please don't do this. I'll do anything." "You're right. You will do anything. You'll sign divorce papers giving me full custody and asking for nothing in return. You'll resign from your job before you're fired. You'll leave town and never contact Lila again." "And if I don't?" Maya answered for me. "Then all of this evidence goes public. The fraud charges, the forgery, the perjury. You'll be lucky if you only get 5 years in prison." Brandon had been standing there in shock, but now he seemed to realize his own situation. "What about me? What about you?" I asked. "You helped her forge documents and plan false testimony. You're an accessory to multiple felonies. But hey, if you want to stick around for the criminal trial, that's your choice." He looked at Sierra, probably calculating whether she was worth going to prison for. Apparently, she wasn't. "Sierra, I'm sorry, but I can't. I have a career to think about." "You're leaving me?" she asked, her voice small and broken. We both knew this was temporary. And just like that, Brandon Walsh walked out of Sierra's life as easily as he'd walked into it, leaving her kneeling on the concrete with nothing but the ruins of her carefully constructed lies. "So," I said, looking down at my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, "what's it going to be?" Sierra looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married 15 years ago. Young, beautiful, full of dreams and possibilities. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize and couldn't forgive. "I'll sign the papers," she whispered. "Good choice." Maya handed her the divorce documents we'd prepared, along with a confession detailing her fraud and forgery. Sierra signed both without reading them, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the pen. "There's one more thing," I said as she finished signing. "I want you to call Lila. I want you to apologize for what you did and explain why you're leaving." "Nick, please, don't make me—" "Call her, now." With trembling fingers, Sierra dialed our daughter's number. Lila answered on the second ring. "Mom?" "Lila, baby, I need to tell you something." The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. Sierra tried to explain, tried to minimize what she'd done, tried to make excuses. Lila listened in silence until Sierra was finished, then said simply, "Don't ever call me again." The line went silent. Sierra dropped the phone and began sobbing, the kind of desperate, hopeless crying that comes when you realize you've lost everything that ever mattered. But I felt nothing. No pity, no regret, no satisfaction. Just a cold, empty space where my marriage used to be. Maya will escort you home to pack your things, I said. You have 2 hours. After that, I never want to see you again. Sierra nodded, unable to speak through her tears. And Sierra? If you ever try to contact Lila, if you ever try to come back to this town, if you ever try to cause problems for me or my daughter, I'll release every piece of evidence Maya collected. All of it. Your career will be over, your reputation will be destroyed, and you'll spend the next decade in prison. Do we understand each other? Yes, she whispered. Good. I walked away then, leaving Sierra kneeling on the concrete floor of the parking garage where her lies had finally caught up with her. Maya would handle the rest, the packing, the departure, the final cleanup of the mess my marriage had become. I drove home to find Lila waiting for me on the front porch, her eyes red from crying, but her expression determined. Is it over? She asked. It's over. Good. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry she did that to you. To us. It's not your fault, kiddo. None of it. I know, but I'm still sorry. We sat together on the porch swing, watching the sun set over our suburban neighborhood. Tomorrow, I'd have to figure out how to rebuild our lives without Sierra. I'd have to learn how to be a single father, how to help Lila heal from her mother's betrayal, how to move forward after 15 years of marriage had ended in lies and fraud and ultimate destruction. But tonight I just sat with my daughter and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Sierra was gone. The lies were exposed. The truth had finally won. And for the first time in years, that was enough. Later that evening, after Lila had gone to bed, I walked across the yard to Tasha's house. She was sitting on her back porch with a glass of wine, like she'd been waiting for me. How did it go? She asked. It's over. Sierra's gone. For good? For good. Tasha nodded, studying my face in the dim porch light. How do you feel? Empty, relieved, angry, sad. Pretty much everything at once. That sounds about right. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of suburban evening. Somewhere in the distance, a dog was barking. A lawnmower hummed in someone's backyard. Normal sounds of normal life, the kind of life I might finally be able to have again. Nick? Tasha said eventually. Yeah? When you're ready, and I mean really ready, not just lonely or angry or looking for revenge, I'd like to see where this goes. I looked at this woman who'd shown me kindness when I needed it most, who'd helped me remember that I was worth more than Sierra's lies and betrayal. I'd like that too, I said. But you're right. I need time to figure out who I am, without all the anger and hurt. I'm not going anywhere. Good, because I think I'm going to need a friend for a while before I'm ready to be anything more. I can do friend, even after everything that's happened, all the drama and complications and mess. Tasha smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from anyone in longer than I could remember. Especially after everything that's happened. You fought for your daughter, Nick. You stood up to people who were trying to destroy you. You chose truth over comfortable lies. That's the kind of man worth waiting for. I leaned over and kissed her forehead, gentle and grateful and full of possibility. Thank you, I said, for everything. Thank you for showing me what integrity looks like. As I walked back to my house, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not for revenge or justice or even happiness, but for something simpler and more valuable. The chance to build a life based on truth instead of lies. The chance to be the kind of father Lila deserved. The chance to find love with someone who saw me clearly and chose me anyway. Sierra had tried to destroy me, but in the end, she'd given me something far more valuable than our broken marriage. She'd shown me who I really was when everything was stripped away. And I liked what I'd found in the ashes of our life together. I liked it very much.